the fastest growing group of guys has been workforce dropouts. Their numbers have grown 3.5 times as fast as employed men. If you do something 3 times faster than average for half a century, you change the world.
What are they doing?
2,000 hours a year of watching screens.
Nick, this is such a privilege for me because your life's work, your first book, Men Without Work, which I think was based really on a research paper regarding work ethic and regarding this weird little thing that nobody seems to ever talk about, which is the labor participation rate. So let's start with the research that led you to conclude that the unemployment numbers we typically rely on are based on a very, very old metric, a Depression-era way to calculate the health of the economy, when in fact the thing we should be looking at, the number of able-bodied people participating in the workforce, goes largely ignored.
So I'm not a labor economist. I'm a kind of a professor of arithmetic, let's say, who looks at problems that are hiding in plain sight. And about 10 years ago, I was starting to read all of this happy talk about how we were at full employment or near full employment, when at the same time, I was seeing all of these public opinion polls where most Americans said they thought we were still in a recession. They thought we were still they were suffering recession. So I think, what's going on here? And I started looking at our employment numbers, and especially our employment numbers for men, for prime age men, the 25 to 54s, who are the backbone of the workforce. And I discovered that we were kind of trying to fight the last war. We had an employment statistics system that was set up to measure the Great Depression, which is to say they'd look at the number of people who were employed, they'd look at the number of people who were unemployed, and they wouldn't look at the number of workforce dropouts, because why would you be a workforce dropout if it was 1939? You'd be looking for a job.
Right.
The problem is that over the past half century in the United States, the fastest growing group of guys has been workforce dropouts, has been prime age men who are neither working nor looking for work. And from 65 to the present, their numbers have grown 3.5 times as fast as employed men, and 3 times as fast as prime age men overall. You know, you do something 3 times faster than average for half a century, you change the world. And so now, for every unemployed guy out of work, looking for a job, there are 4 guys who are neither working nor looking for work. So if you're looking at the unemployment figures, you're missing 4/5 of the problem.
I think so many people assume that high unemployment can typically be cured by creating more opportunity. That's been, albeit somewhat rudimentary, but that's the assumption I always worked on. A lot of people are out of work. Well, our government needs to create more jobs somehow. But you're saying that when you see an obvious glut of opportunity and a dearth of people willing to work, then that narrative is simply wrong. And, you know, at some point, we just have to A, accept it, and B, try to figure out what's driving it.
The conventional wisdom in academic and policy circles is that the work problem for guys is what they call economic and structural change, you know, the decline of manufacturing, China enters the World Trade Organization, that sort of stuff. And there's some truth to it, but that isn't the whole story, and I don't think it's most of the story. Look at where we are today, Mike. We've got 10, 11 million unfilled jobs in the United States, and the work rate for prime age guys is down to depression levels. It's lower than it was in 1940. For the whole of the 21st century, look at all of the months of the last 22 years, the average is worse than it was in 1940 when we started to measure this stuff and when the national unemployment rate was almost 15%. In terms of work rates for the United States today for guys, we're at about a 1937 level, even though we've got over 10 million unfilled jobs in the country.
What does it mean? Right? I mean, when we see a lot of people out of work, we know what that means. We can still remember the breadlines and all of the horror of being unemployed. But what does it mean to see millions and millions of open jobs that no one seems to want? And what does that say about our country?
Well, I mean, if you could argue that all of these jobs were for like computer coders or chemical engineers, you could say this is just a shortage of skills. But you really can't make that argument right now. Anybody who travels across the United States sees all of the help wanted application signs kind of everywhere for everything. We know about it in hospitality. We know about it in retail. The skills that people need for millions of these open jobs are just the simple skills of coming to work, showing up on time, every day, not stoned.
Yeah, piss clean.
There's some, so pretty modest skills, right? And so I'm not persuaded by the skills mismatch argument that we've heard. There may be some of that, but there's also there are a huge number of jobs that are just going begging, and people are sitting on the sidelines, staying away from the opportunity that's there.
This has been really humbling for me, Nick, in a personal way, because when I started my foundation, Labor Day 2008, we were getting into another recession. I think back then we were allowed to call it that. And to your point, every day, more and more people unemployed all over the headlines, and yet everywhere I go, I see these help wanted signs. And so I can clearly see there's another narrative in the country that's unfolding, because I had the privilege to work in every single state half a dozen times. So I knew it was real. But in my head, what I wanted to do was say something that wouldn't alienate my friends on the left or my friends on the right. And so I said, here's what I think the problem is. There is a gap in skills. There's a mismatch in skills. And if we can only get more people who are unskilled, skilled, then we'll start to move the needle. And then, like a frog in the boiling water, I started to think maybe it's not a skills gap. Maybe it's a will gap. And that's when I got a lot of pushback from a lot of people. And that's why I'm so excited by your research, because it seems to indicate really more than a lack of skill, a genuine lack of will. And am I putting words in your mouth, or is that close?
No, you're not. I mean, I think that your work on trying to encourage skills is noble. We need more skills. Nobody argues against that. I mean, that wins on the merits. What we see in addition to that is that people who drop, guys in particular, who drop out of the labor force tend to be long-termers. Once you get out, you kind of tend to stay out. It's one thing if you are unemployed, if you were out of a job and looking for work. That seems to be a very different dynamic from dropping out of the labor force, because the people who drop out of the labor force don't seem to respond to the miracle of the marketplace, and trying to figure out how we get people back from this pool of misery that I think a lot of people are in. It wins on all sorts of ways, but it's humanitarian as much as anything else.
How many millions of men are we talking about? And if they're not working or looking for work, I'm assuming these are able-bodied men, both mentally healthy, physically healthy, prime of their life, affirmatively not looking for a paycheck. What are they doing?
Soon may the noblemen come to bring a bottle for everyone. One day when the waiting is done, we'll take a drink and go.
Well, about a tenth, maybe more than a tenth of the 7 million plus guys who are not working or looking for work are look to be like full-time students. They're not at work, they're training, they want to get back into the game. Their patterns of life look pretty much like employed people's patterns for obvious reasons. The overwhelming majority, unfortunately, are in this pool of neither employed nor in education or training, what the Brits call NEET, NEET. And we know a little bit about what they're doing because the government comes up with these time use surveys, and they ask all adults whether they're working or not, to kind of get a sample to respond to this. It's kind of heartbreaking what the self-response is on this. Basically, these guys say that they don't do civil society, they don't do worship, they don't do charity, they don't do volunteer. They've got a lot of time on their hands, but they don't do a lot of help around the house, they say, their words, their report. They don't do much help with other people in the house. What they say they do is to watch. And, these surveys can't tell us what they're watching or what they're watching it on, but it's like 2,000 hours a year of watching screens. It's like as much time as a full-time job. And you add to that the awful little extra, which you get from a couple of these special surveys. Almost half of these guys said that they were taking pain medication every day. Didn't say what type of. So you've got this picture of people who are spending their lives, not only playing Call of Duty, but playing Call of Duty stoned, and it's a huge waste of human potential. It's a tragedy of its, in its own right. And it's also probably kind of like a training ground for the sort of deaths of despair that we're seeing all too many of in America today.
Deaths of despair. That rhymes pretty nicely with, was it Thoreau? Lives of quiet desperation would ultimately lead you to some kind of demise rooted in despair. But God, what a horrible trap, because you enter into that world probably not despairing. You enter into that world. Screens are fun. Let's take a deep dive. Let's just take a few days off and then maybe a few days more. But Nick, how are they eating? How are they paying for things? Are like these people, is their money coming from a trust? Is it the government? Did they save up for some premature retirement? Who's paying for it?
That's a great question. And Mike, of course, if you're talking about 7 million people, there's kind of some of everything in there. But if you're playing the odds, you'd say that most of these dropout men are being supported by their girlfriends and their families, if you include Uncle Sam as part of the family. One of the things that I found is that more than half of the dropout men receiving at least one benefit from one disability program. Now, that's not a princely life, but that's enough to afford a non-work lifestyle until you get old enough to qualify for Social Security.
Do you think these men are as addicted to the screens that they're spending 2,000 hours a year observing, or to whatever they're using to medicate themselves in a pharmacological fashion?
Well, there is some sort of metaphysical misery going on in the United States that doesn't have anything to do with poverty as we had previously thought of it, a lack of resources. There are people who, in any sort of historical perspective, would not be considered to be desperately materially poor, who are experiencing this sort of distress, misery, disconnection. It's perfectly possible, as you said, to have a lot of fun playing video games. It's fun to use your free time in ways that restore you or are uplifting. What I think we're seeing here is a use of a huge amount of free time in a way that's unfortunately kind of degrading, not just for the people involved, but it has kind of a knock-on effect for their loved ones, for their community, maybe even for society as a whole.
How can I be persuasive? What can I do that I'm not doing? I mean, we award work ethic scholarships every year, Nick, usually $1.5 million worth of them. We try and find examples of people who have prospered as a result of learning a trade. We try and push back against the stereotypes and the stigmas that have somehow turned vocational education into a mark of Cain. And I feel sometimes like we are moving the needle, because now I've got more than anecdotal evidence. I can point to actual people. I can't tell you how often when I go and talk about these things to many of the men you've just described, who have torn themselves away from their screens long enough to sit there to watch the dirty jobs guy rail against the dying of the light. I don't think I'm reaching them. So, what can we do?
Well, I mean, I think you're doing yeoman service. We live in kind of a time, it seems to me, when we're kind of watching slowly the death of truth in the public square. So maybe the first thing we can do is to kind of commit truth in public, and we can talk about the nobility of work. I mean, work is a service to others that helps to complete you. It helps to connect you to society. People need society. I mean, we're social beings. We need to be connected to family and to work and to our institutions and faith and to other things. It helps to complete us. And it's got all sorts of personally remunerative aspects in a totally non-monetary fashion. Just talking about that, I think, kind of is truth in the service of the public good. Another thing that occurs to me, and you may have thought about this a lot, is about the whole death of the summer job in the United States. I mean, I've got some numbers on this, which I think would make you cry. Back when I was a young'un, I mean, summer jobs were a thing. I'd get a summer job. Everybody else I knew would get summer jobs. And it would help you be independent. It might help you, pay for school and stuff. But it would also help you understand what the work world was like. And so by the time that you were, say, 25, you had 10 years already of experience in the work world. Now you find people whose first experience in the work world isn't until they're in their 20s or their mid-20s. So it's like this extended adolescence or childhood period when you finally have a collision with the work world. It may not go as well as it would have if you had a kind of more experience and training earlier.
But perversely, this thing has happened, this incredible mismatch of opportunity with willing applicants, so that the natural consequence that somebody in their mid-20s should encounter when they run headlong into the cold, hard realities of reporting for work, that natural consequence now is crumbling because employers seem so desperate to hire anybody that the bar is so low. Well, you have a pulse. Look at you. You're fogging a mirror. When can you start? And so on the one hand, we've got this completely warped set of expectations, but we don't have the consequences that we used to have because of this shortage in the basic work force. And so what are employers supposed to do? Keep lowering the standards? Go out of business? Hire robots? It feels like my friends on the left will quickly say, look, what you have here is a problem of income distribution, wealth distribution, greedy, rapacious business owners paying too little for hard work. And this whole thing could be corrected if those greedy, rapacious business owners simply paid more. Paul Krugman, I think, wrote years ago, there's no skills gap, there's no will gap, it's just a function of people not paying enough money. My friends on the right will gravitate more toward the moralistic ideas that you said before and basically just say, well, what you got here is 7 million lazy layabouts. That's what you got. So over here, conservatives are saying you got a lazy character problem. And over here, liberals are saying you've got an unfair distribution of wealth. And I have my opinion, but I'm just wondering, is there some truth in both? And is there a way to talk about it, without showing your slip too much?
Well, I think there is enough. There's enough truth that both sides can, ratify themselves. They can see things that convince them that they're right. There's a lot more to the story, I think. Some of the 7 million are disabled and are incapable of work. And that's why we put the disability programs into place. And,
Sure.
In the original thing. That was the intention for them. The disability programs have been, I'm afraid, terribly misused and kind of perverted from their original intentions into, in too many cases, this alternative for a work-free existence. We want to be able to protect the people who are really need the protection, and we want to get everybody else back into the game.
One word comes to mind for me that could be missing in a lot of these people is purpose.
Purpose and meaning. Purpose and meaning in life. Who are you and what do you do? Who are you and what do you do? And that's maybe the flip side of shame and stigma is affirmation and validation.
Perfect.
So it's the push and the pull there, isn't it?
Carrot and the stick.
Right.
Those 7 million, to the degree that you can really break it down, Nick, I get that 10% or 700,000 are in school. So let's just say, okay, they're in some process of bettering themselves. And I get that some other percentage, although I don't know quite what it is, are disabled. I'd like to know what that percentage is and any other worthwhile metric that would, make this a smaller category. So ultimately, I'm left with a number of truly able-bodied people who have affirmatively chosen to do nothing to contribute to society or better themselves. Just so it's clear in my mind what the real world numbers are.
Well, so we've got this crazy quilt broken disability system where we've got lots of different programs, and they don't talk to each other. They don't play nice with each other. The programs that are run by the Social Security Administration don't talk to the Veterans Administration, and neither of them talk to a workers' comp, and none of those talk to the state disability programs. So there's no office in Washington where you can find the person who'll tell you exactly how many Americans are getting one or more disability payments. Right? So as best I could figure out, before COVID, about half of the guys who were out of the workforce were receiving one or more disability program benefits. And about 2/3 of them lived in a home that was receiving at least one disability program benefit. Now, how are they qualifying for disability? Well, if they're in the Social Security archipelago, the two fastest growing areas of eligibility for benefits are what's called musculoskeletal and psychological problems. Okay. If any of us go to a doctor, they can tell us whether we have a broken leg. If we go to a doctor, they can tell us whether we've got TB. Right? If any of us go to a doctor, they can't tell us if we've got pain in our back. If that's something, back pain, there's no doctor who can tell you whether you do or not. And if I go to a doctor and I say I've got sad feelings, there's no doctor who can disprove me. So we've got this huge gray area out there where the fastest growing segment of disability beneficiaries are in this kind of this gray zone here, and we don't actually get these numbers off of clinical assessments. We get these off of applications for a legal process, right? And so I can't give you the exact number, but you can see what the devilish ambiguity there is, right?
Yeah, trust me, it hurts.
Yeah.
Oi, okay, so if 2/3 of the 7 million live in households that are receiving some form of disability, that means over 2 million are not. And that doesn't sound like as big a number as the other, but it's still not the number that scares me most. It's the 11 million number. It's just the number of jobs that, for whatever reason, are not being filled.
Why would we expect with the bounty in our country to have a peacetime labor shortage of 10 or 11 million people? Labor shortages happen during war. Labor shortages happen when you've got some sort of crisis or catastrophe that you've got to mobilize a whole part of your population and take it away from the workforce. That's not at all what's happening.
How much of the responsibility lies on the people who are enabling these people to play Call of Duty and take opioids?
You mean taxpayers or Washington?
I meant even family members or
family members. Well, I mean, it's you can do the sort of the time machine thought experiment, Chuck. You can say, let's take all of what we've got going on here now. Let's move it back to Salem, Massachusetts in like 1670. How would that play out there, right? I mean, I don't think it would play out terribly well because a lot of people back then would have looked at this and say, well, they had stocks. They also had witches.
Yes,
and they also believed in going to hell, right? And so all of those things, I think, would have put a tiny bit of a damper on what we see going on now, right? But that's just kind of like a thought experiment way of thinking about how the difference in ethics look.
I mean, if it's always door number 1 or door number 2, then you wind up with blue collar or white collar.
Yeah.
And I just don't know that the color of collars matters anymore these days, any more than the unemployment rate. I'm so grateful for your time, and I'm so grateful for your work. And, I don't want to overplug it, but for the love of God, people, this book matters. It's called Men Without Work, and it's based on some of the most compelling research I've ever seen. Nick, I know you're not in this for the money. I know it's hard work. Everybody I know in your world, you can follow the science, or you can follow the money, or you can follow the truth. And good on you for following the truth. Really, really so appreciate all of your work.
It's a blast doing this. Thank you so much for this. It's been a lot of fun for me.
If you like what you heard,
And even if you don't,
Won't you please,
pretty please subscribe. Well, I hate to beg and I hate to plead, but please, pretty freaking please subscribe.